Hey everybody, it's Charles, and this is the animation workshop that we're going to be doing right now. So animation is a series of moving images. And the way we make animation, there are lots of different ways. We can create flipbooks, and we can create digital animations. There are things called zoetropes. And there's all kinds of ways to make animations. So what I want to show you in this video is a couple of different methods for making an animation. All right, let's begin. So what I have open and I'm going to be using is a program called GIMP. GIMP is a photo editing program primarily, but it has a lot of built-in drawing tools and stuff. Alright, to make a digital animation, first we have to create a sort of a canvas to work on. So working in GIMP, I'm going to go File, New, so I'm going to hit New. And I get this dialog box, and this is a good screen resolution size for an animation if you wanted to take up like a full computer screen. 1920 by 1080 works. It's the default size, and it's in pixels. And when I go to advanced options, I don't want to make it quite so large. That's a print size, and you can't really print an animation anyway. So what I want to do is I want to do web size, which is 72 pixels by 72 pixels. So with this aspect ratio locked, when I put 72 in here and click Tab, it automatically chooses 72 for the other one. All right, so when I click OK, it's going to make my screen, which is quite large. I am going to zoom out so we can see more of the screen. So you can go to View, Zoom, and right now it's at 1:1. I'm going to go 1:2, which will cut the screen size in half and be a much more workable size for us to be able to use. Okay, so now you can see the whole page. I showed you the example of the flipbook. What we did on the flipbook is we worked page by page or layer by layer, with starting from the bottom layer working up to create a series of images that when put together, when flipped through, they look like an animation. So we're going to do something very similar in this digital animation that we're going to make in GIMP. All right, so one of the things that I want to talk about as I'm working and look at are some of the 12 principles of animation as defined by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, who were two of the founders of Disney Corporation. So the two that are going to apply most in this animation are slow in and slow out, which we talked about a little bit in the flipbook, and also squash and stretch. So we're going to make a quick animation of a bouncing ball that's going to squash and stretch as it goes, and we're going to use the principle of slow in and slow out, meaning things start off slowly, get faster, and then slow down at the end of their motion. Alright, so let's take a look and see how we do that. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is to create something that's going to bounce, so we're going to make a ball. And the way I like to do that in GIMP is I use my ellipse select tool. There are many ways you can do things, but for me this works out best. And with the ellipse select tool selected, I'm going to hold the shift key and I'm going to add a selection that is pretty round. I don't want it to be too big, but big enough that it's going to be pretty significant. But I want it in a round state right now. It hasn't begun to fall or anything else yet. So that circular object, I want to give it some fill. Let's make it an orange color. I'm not going to turn it into a basketball or anything, but think of it as a basketball. So I'm going to use my bucket fill tool, and I'm going to fill that shape. And then I'm going to go select none. And I have a basketball or a ball that's going to fall, hit the ground, and bounce. All right, so what I need to do next is I need to duplicate that layer. And this is the layer panel over here. And the way I duplicate it is there is actually a button that says duplicate the layer. It looks like two outlines of rectangles, one over the other. Or I could right click here and I can go duplicate layer. Either way, it gives me two copies of the same layer. So remembering that we're starting from the bottom up, right now both balls are in the same place. I want to start moving this ball, right? So if I want to see it move, what I need to do is make this layer a little bit more transparent so I can see the layer below it. So I'm going to bring this down pretty significantly. Now you're not seeing anything because it's still on top of the other ball. But with the Move tool, And the way you get that is you hit the letter M, or you can click on the tool up here. It kind of looks like a cross with arrows at the end, or maybe a compass rose, right? So I'm going to click on the ball and I'm going to drag it down a little, and you can see it's starting to see the other layer through it now. So now I can see I've moved it a little bit, and if I go back to full opacity, meaning not transparent at all, bring this back up to 100%. Now you won't be able to see that, but if I flick on and off the visibility of that layer, so right now it's off, so I'm seeing the bottom layer. When I turn it on, I see that layer. It looks like it drops a little bit. All right, it hasn't changed shape yet, but it has dropped. One of the things that I like to do is I like to get rid of, you see it's starting with this yellow line to be in a different spot. That's the layer. That's where this layer is. If I right click on the layer and I go to layer to image size, it'll put that layer exactly on top of there without moving the ball. So now the ball is still dropped, but the layer itself is not moved. So now I have that whole white layer. All right, so I'm going to duplicate it again. And on this third layer, I'm going to make sure the second one is on. I'm going to put on the visibility, and I'm going to drop down the opacity again. And with the move tool, I want to move it down slightly more. All right, now what I'm doing is I'm going in very small at the beginning. And the reason for that, and I'm going to go again layer to image size. The reason I'm going very slowly and very, very small movements is for that slow in, slow out I talked about. When I have a lot of images that are close together, so it's here, it's dropping a little bit, it drops more. When I have that set up, what happens is the more images that I have that are closer together, it will start to be slower. Remember that gravity has an acceleration to it, meaning things start to go faster and faster as they fall. So if it was at its peak and it's starting to fall, it's going to go faster and faster, and so we should make it look that way. So we want it to start out slow and get faster, so we're going to continue working with it. All right, so I'm going to go with another duplicate layer, and I'm going to again lower the opacity, and I want to move it down. I'm going to go a little further down now because it's starting to get faster, and I'm going to size the layer to image size again, and bring it back to full opacity so it's not transparent anymore. And again, we'll just see what it looks like. So it's starting here, it's dropping down as each layer comes. One of the things I want to do on this layer is I want to transform it a little bit. So in order to do that, I want it to start to look like it's stretching out. As the ball falls, it will become sort of elongated. So it starts out a nice round sphere. It's going to elongate a little bit and get narrower. So it's going to get narrower and longer. So I want to start to show that with this layer. So how do I do that? There are a couple of things that I can do. I can scale the height and width separately by unlocking the aspect ratio. So if I want it to get longer as it's falling, I can change the height just slightly. And if I want it to get narrower, so I'm making the height bigger and the width narrower. And you can see the ball is starting to elongate a little bit. You want to keep the volume of the ball the same. So one of the things when I'm scaling that I want to keep in mind is whatever I do on this side to make it narrower, I also want to increase it by about the same amount the other way. Let's make this 1900, and I'm going to add 20 to this and make it 1100. I'm going to scale that. And what you see is the whole layer will have scaled, but the ball itself is going to be a little bit squished compared to what it was. Not so much yet because it's still not moving so fast. I do want to lower the opacity and see where we are. it kind of moved over, right? So I want to use my move tool, get back to the move tool, and bring it straight down under again. So it's starting to elongate. This is part of squash and stretch, by the way, which is the first principle of animation. I'm going to go to layer to image size to fix the layer again, and I'm coming back to 100% opacity before the next one. All right, so I'm going to duplicate that layer once again. Let's duplicate it, and I'm going to move the ball down a little again. Let's bring the opacity down and drag it down some more, this time even a little further. And I want to elongate it again more in the vertical direction. So I'm going to scale it once again. So I'm going to go back to the scale tool. And by the way, it's Shift S if you need to get to the scale tool. I'm going to click on it. This is not locked. Let's bring it down another 40 this time, make it 1880. And I'm going to bring my height up by 40. So I'm going to make it 1120. And I'm going to scale that. And you can see the ball is starting to look more and more elongated as it falls down. So I'll bring that back to full opacity. And now you see this ball is not as round as the others were. So we can turn all those off and you'll see how it's falling. See how nice and round it is. It's still round, it's falling a little bit. Now it's going to start falling faster and it's elongating. That's what our goal is. That's what we want to try and do. All right, I'm going to go layer to image size again here to get rid of those yellow lines. All right, so let's duplicate this once again, duplicate layer, and I'm going to once again bring the opacity way down. I'll drag it down even some more. I'm going to again scale it. So this time I want to go down by 60 on this, so that would be 1860. And this one I'm going to bring up 60, which is 1140. And I want to scale that. And you can see now we're significantly more oblong. And these are getting further and further apart. So it's going to make it look like it's going faster and faster as it's going down. So I want to bring the opacity back up again. And I want to change the scale of this again, layer to image size, so that we get rid of those yellow lines. All right. So maybe the next one we're going to start hitting the ground. So I'm going to click on that, duplicate the layer once again. Again, go for an opacity change so that I can see what's happening. Drag this down. Let's have it right where it's hitting, just about to hit the ground. So here it's hitting the ground. And we're going to start to go back in the other direction, right? So what I need to do with this is I need to change the scale again. This one, we're going to scale it. I guess we're going to go one more time that's a little bit more. So we were at 1860. Let's make it 1850. And this one we had at 1140. We're going to make it 1150. And you see it's even longer and narrower. I'm going to use my move tool to bring it back to where it's hitting the ground. Now remember, it's accelerating, but it's hitting the ground at this point, so it's going to start slowing down a little bit. So now, let's bring it back to full opacity, and I'm going to, again, set the layer to image size. All right, so now, if I wanted to see what I'm doing and test so far this far how it's working, I'm going to use my filters. I can click on filters up here, and I can go to animation, and down here I can go to playback. And what will happen is it's going to open a playback screen, and I can hit start, and you'll see it's starting to fall slowly and gets a little faster as it's going down. Okay, so you can see it's clearly falling. It's a little choppy at this point. We didn't probably make enough layers. The more layers you make, the less choppy it will be. So now what's going to happen is it's going to start going the other direction. So we have a ball here that is kind of squished and elongated. It's squished narrow inside in the width, and it's elongated in the height. We're going to start moving in the opposite direction as the ball is going to squish down to the ground a little bit from hitting the ground. So I want to duplicate that layer, and I want to scale again. Right now we're on the ground, so I don't want to move it down anymore right now, but I want it to keep contact with the ground for a while. So I'm going to scale. So let me click on that, and probably starting this by returning to a circle would be a great thing. So I'm going to go, let's see, we were down 70, I think. So I'm going to bring it up 70 so that the width is going to go back to what it was in a circle. So we're going to bring it back to 1990. And by the way, these are the numbers for the whole frame, not for the ball itself. And the height, we went up 70, so we want to go down 70. I'm going to go to 1010. Scale. And you see the ball is getting much rounder now. I'm going to need to move that. So let's lower the opacity again, so we can see through what we're doing. Go back to our move tool. And so now we didn't move the ball, but you see it's starting to squish. And we're going to need several layers of it squishing. So we were in the stretch position, now we're in the squish position, or squash and stretch. So the ball is going to keep getting wider, and it's going to keep squashing, and then it's going to start bouncing up again. So I got layered image size. All right, so let's duplicate it again. Again, we're going to not move it so much as we're going to scale it again. So we want this one, we're going to bring it out again. Let's bring it up 80. So I'm going to go to 2000, and I'm going to bring this one down 80 and make it 1000. So now we're really starting to squish the ball. Looks actually pretty close to a circle now. And we're going to, again, layered image size. We're going to move the ball back to where it needs to be covering that. So the last couple of layers, you see the ball is coming and it's starting to squish down. And that's what we're looking for. It's going to keep getting wider and squishing down a little bit. Let's move this down a little bit because we're showing part of the other ball below it. All right, let's continue. So we're going to duplicate the layer again. Again, we want to stretch it out. We don't always have to do it with numbers. We can actually elongate it this way by stretching that way, and squish down even more this way. And we want to bring the opacity down, scale it out, and we're going to use our move tool to move it back again, cover, and we should have a good squish on that one, or squash. Bring it back to fully opaque, and again, so that ball really started to squish on that layer. See how it bent down? And now we're going to start stretching it, going back in the other direction, because it's going to start bouncing up. So we want to start stretching it. So I'm going to duplicate the layer again. And what may start happening as it bounces up, because if you look here in the layer panel, each one is showing more and more transparency. Each layer may end up starting to show the layer before if we don't do something, but we'll cross that bridge if we get there. We may need to fill in some of that layer. All right, so what I'm going to do now is, again, scale it. Now remember, we want to start scaling it up and narrower. And let's scale it. And let's go to some transparency and go to our move tool and move it back where it's supposed to be. Let's bring it taller. Didn't really change the height too much. Let's bring the height up even more. Okay, scale. And bring our background back to full opacity again. So we're now back to what's pretty much a circle. We're going to duplicate that again, bring the opacity down, scale it again on the new layer. So we're going to start squishing again and stretching taller as it jumps up, and we need to scale that and move it with our move tool. And we want to keep that vertical alignment that we're getting. So we can go to our background and we're going to go layer to image size, and we're going to bring our opacity back to full opacity, and we can start moving it up from there even more now. So now we're kind of in the stretched mode, which is getting pretty obvious. As it bounces, it's going to stretch and start bouncing up. So let's bring it up a little bit on the next one. Duplicate the layer. I don't really want to stretch it too much more, so I'm going to bring the layer up. And here is where I'm starting to see some of the ball below it. I was talking about that before. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to scale this layer so that it's layer to image size. And on that layer, I want to fill in that bottom part with the paint bucket tool. So that empty part, you can see now, is covering where the ball below it was. So we're okay there. I want to zoom in to see a little better because it looks like it flattened on the bottom, and I want to try and fix that. So I can use my zoom tool, trace a square around it. I got a couple of things here. I can see that line here. So working on this layer, I can go with my paintbrush tool. And so what happened was when I was bringing the ball down, remember I was staying at the bottom, but I may have dropped below the bottom a little bit and cut it off when I changed the shape. So what I'm going to do to fix that is I'm going to use my Bezier tool. It's the tool here, it's called the Paths tool, and it says Create and Edit Paths B. You could hit the letter B and grab that tool. And I'm going to click right on the edge there of where that meets, where it started to go wrong, and let go. Then I'm going to click and drag to make that curve, to try and fix that curve. So I want to be right on the edge, and I'm going to click and drag till it looks kind of right, which is pretty close there, I think. I want to make sure it's centered at the bottom. And if I hit enter or return, what it's going to do is fill in that spot. So I can now use my paint bucket tool to paint that back in and select none. And you can see there's a little spot I'm going to need to go fix. So I'm going to take my paintbrush tool with this as the orange as the foreground color, and I'm just going to paint that back in. So it should not be too noticeable. There we go. All right, so I think that's going to be okay. Let's zoom back out. So my scale before that I'd gone to was 1 to 2, so I'm going to go back to that. So let's start going up again from there, and I may need again to fill back in the white. So I'm going to duplicate the layer, and I'm going to start moving it up. So I want to move, it can go a little faster this time. I want to make it more transparent so I can see through it. So I'm going to go bring the opacity down again. So that's a good distance. It went only a little bit last time. It's going a little faster as it starts to go up, but then it's going to start to slow down again, right? So I'm going to go to layer to image size, and I'm going to go back to full opacity, and I'm going to need to fix that bottom again. As I showed you before, when we move it up, every time we've cut that, it's started to cut the background that's around it, the white background. So let's drop in some white paint. I'm going to make the white the foreground color again by clicking this little exchange foreground and background colors, and I'm going to get rid of that. All right, so now I'm done with that layer. I'm going to duplicate the layer again. I'm going to give myself some less opacity, I'm going to drag it up with the move tool. And now I want to start lowering the stretch. We're going to go back to a circle when we get to up around here, right? So I want to start making that a little bit less. So I'm going to grab my scale tool. And again, you don't want to really change your volume too much. I'm going to shrink it this way and expand it this way a little bit. Let's make this a little bigger so that we can see more of what's going on. And I can expand it this way also. So we're back to more of a circle. I'm going to drag it back in line with where we were. And I'm going to bring back to full opacity. And again, we're going to have to scale the layer to image size, and we're going to have to fill in that bottom. So we're going to go layer to image size. So it's going to be a common when we're going back up problem. Which should also be a problem if we were making a ball that was thrown and bouncing. We would have the same problem with the background moving. So now I'm going to fill in that background again with the white, and we're starting to get back to a normal shape. Let's go up some more. We're going to slow down as we're going up because of gravity. Gravity accelerates when things are going down, but when things are going back up, it decelerates. It makes it go slower, right? So we're going to add more layers and make them a little closer together as we go up. So let's see where we are in relation to the one below it. Not too bad. We're starting to slow down. Let's go up a little higher, and we want to get that a little bit even more round. So we're going to scale it again and bring it out just a little bit more and down just a little more. And we're going to move it in line to where we were. And we're pretty round right now, so I'm probably going to leave it at that amount of round. Notice nothing below it is showing, so I may not have to deal with that. We'll see what happens here. But let's go back to full opacity. Yep, that one's good. So we're covering that last layer pretty well, so we don't have to worry about that. And we're just going to go crop the layer back, layer to image size. And that's mostly because that yellow line bothers everybody that's working. One or two more will get us back to a high enough position where we'll be able to see it start over again. So let's go duplicate it, duplicate the layer, and we're going to bring down the opacity, drag it up, and we can bring the opacity back to 100%, duplicate the layer again, bring the opacity down, drag it up a little more, and layer to image size again, bring the opacity back up, and maybe one or two more just to get it up high enough. Duplicate the layer, move it up a little bit. I want to check, reduce the opacity so I can see where I moved it to. Alright, bring it back up, and layer to image size again. And we're going to do one more. Duplicate the layer, opacity down, drag it up, and we'll leave it there. Layer to image size. And we are going to bring the opacity back up on this layer, and we should be really pretty much done. Let's take a look and see how it looks. Let's do it this way. I'm going to right click on here to go to filters. I'm going to go to playback, animation playback, and it's going to bring that screen back up again. And if I hit it, we're going to fall, we're going to bounce, squish, and leap. And this is not a great playback. It gets slower as it goes back to the top. Speeds up as it's going down, slower as it goes back to the top. So this playback is just so that we can see what we're doing. The real playback will happen when we convert it to an animated GIF. Animated GIFs are what you see on the internet frequently when you see little animations. So the way we do that is we're going to first save it. I'm going to go File, Save. I'm going to say Bouncing Ball. And .xcf is not going to animate. That's just going to bring me back to this program. I'm going to put it on the desktop so we can find it easily. But it's just bringing us back to this program. What I need to do is I need to now export it as a GIF file. So I'm going to go export as. I'm going to change the PNG that defaults up here to GIF. And when I hit export, you're going to see we're going to get a different dialog box up. First, it's going to say some things actually extend beyond the borders. Do we want to crop? Yes, we do. Now, this is the important thing because you will not get anything that works if you don't click this box that says as animation. So a GIF is just a picture file, but if we make it an animation, it saves it as a series of pictures that run over and over again. We can change the delay between frames. 100 milliseconds is pretty fast. So I don't really think we need to make any changes here. We're going to click export, and it should go to my desktop as an animated GIF file. So here it is. I'm going to click on it. And you see when I open it in preview, it doesn't show it as an animation. It shows the different series of pictures. So what I really need to do is open it, right-click, and open with. And I'm going to open it with a web browser. I'll open it with Safari. You can use Chrome. But if I open it with a web browser, what you'll see is the actual animation that we created. You see how it's changing speeds? As it goes up, it gets slower. As it comes down, it gets faster. It's squashing and stretching like a ball. So I think we've done pretty well with this one. All right, so make a flipbook if you want. Make an animated GIF like this one, and send me your work. Let me see what you've done. All right, have a great day, and I'm looking forward to our next work.